As soon as Zoe felt Blaine's strong arms pull her into his warm embrace, she couldn't hold it in anymore. Zoe burst into tears. Blaine was home. He was safe. Zoe had been so afraid that she would never see Blaine again. She wrapped her arms around him and hugged him tightly. It was as if she was afraid if she didn't hold on, he might suddenly disappear again. Blaine was gratified when he felt Zoe's arms tighten around him, but at the same time, he couldn't help wincing in pain. Her tight embrace aggravated his injury, but he didn't say anything. Although it was painful, being held by her, no matter how much it hurt, was worth it. Stop crying. Blaine bent over and lowered his head, gently wiping away her tears. Zoe didn't say anything. She just kept crying, venting all of the painful feelings that had haunted her nights and days so much that she barely slept or ate for a week. Now that Blaine was home, Zoe couldn't tear herself away. She stayed in his embrace, unable to let go. Blaine hadn't expected Zoe to cry so much. He wiped tears from her face, each one making an imprint on his heart. With Zoe still in his arms, he walked them over to the sofa where he laid her down, trapping her between him and the sofa. Zoe was still crying, completely ignoring his actions. She covered her red and swollen eyes with her hands, embarrassed by her inability to stop, but unable to help herself. Blaine reached out and gently moved her hands away from her eyes. Come, don't cry. Let me have a good look at you first. Zoe cried even harder when she heard this. She weakly slapped him on the chest as all of her pent-up emotions came spilling out. You lied to me. You promised. You promised me that you would be safe, but then you disappeared. I didn't hear from you for a week. Do you know how worried I was? How scared I was? Zoe sobbed uncontrollably. She had shed so many tears over this man, but these tears were different. Zoe knew she couldn't be with Blaine, but she couldn't handle the thought of Blaine not being a part of this world, even if he couldn't be a part of hers. Blaine smoothed Zoe's long hair off of her face as he took in the dark circles under her eyes and her pale complexion. Frowning, he told her, "And what about you? Zoe, you also promised that you would take good care of yourself. I was only gone 2 weeks, and you've lost so much weight. And you were already too thin. Is this how you take good care of yourself?" Zoe didn't argue with him because she knew what he said was true. She hadn't been taking care of herself. Zoe returned his gaze with watery eyes, telling him honestly, "I was so afraid I'd never see you again, so I haven't slept at all." "What do you mean you haven't slept at all?" Blaine's face instantly darkened, but his touch was gentle as he softly caressed Zoe's cheek, and his eyes filled with heartache. Zoe's eyes blurred. She hugged his sturdy waist, her small head snuggling into his embrace, and softly whispered, "I'm so sleepy. I really do want to sleep." Blaine was home. He had returned to Zoe's side. With her arms around him, knowing he was with her and safe, Zoe could finally sleep in peace. She faintly whispered, "I can finally sleep." As soon as Zoe finished her sentence, before Blaine could even reply, she fell into a deep sleep. Blaine raised his eyebrows in surprise, looking at her delicate, tear-streaked face, listening to her even breathing, a sound so light and pleasing. At that moment, Blaine knew this woman was his whole world. He knew that regardless of how much he dodged or evaded, he couldn't escape the hold Zoe had on his heart. It seemed that Zoe was destined to be the most important person in Blaine's life. Zoe slept soundly. When she next opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was Blaine's handsome face. He slept peacefully beside her in his bedroom, the morning sun reflecting off his tan skin. Zoe couldn't help but reach out her hand to touch him, wanting to assure herself he was real and really home with her. However, before she could, Blaine suddenly woke up and caught her, shackling her small hand inside his big palm. He opened his eyes, which were filled with drowsy heat. He opened his mouth and slightly nibbled on Zoe's hand. With a flip of his body, Blaine pressed her under him. "You're touching me so early in the morning. Why? What do you want to do?" His voice was a little hoarse. Blaine watched her as Zoe stared up at him as if she was trying to determine whether the face in front of her was real. Suddenly, her eyes turned watery again. "Where have you been this past week?" Zoe asked in a pained whisper. Zoe had been so relieved and sleepy yesterday that she hadn't yet asked Blaine what exactly had happened to him. Now that Zoe had slept soundly, she needed to get answers to all of the questions that had been haunting her for a week. Blaine lowered his head and fixed his gaze on the woman beneath him. He placed both hands on the sides of Zoe's head, holding her. He stroked her forehead and cheeks with his thumbs, every touch warm and gentle. His movements were casual, but Blaine acted as if he was caressing the most precious treasure in his life.
Hi, Zoe here. If you are wondering what happens next, then download the Pocket FM app and listen to the exciting episodes of Rekindled Heartache now.